life's too short. And so, goodness, why play it safe? I mean, if it's going to be short, why not take some big swings? And so I love that idea of 20% braver. This is the Leadership Foundry podcast. I'm your host this week, Brandon Smith, and joining me is my wonderful, amazing producer, Whitney. Whitney, how are you?
Good, Brandon. How are you?
I'm well. So for our conversation today, I was inspired, pun intended, by my conversation with Randy earlier this month and talking about the idea of inspiration. And I recently was with a client, and this particular client's leader had come in and was talking to the group and had made some comment that they had been challenged by a coach of theirs with this question that I want to pose for our listeners this week. So think of our conversation this week as kind of inspiration part 2. And this was the question that she was posed with. What would it look like if you were 20% braver in 2025? What would it look like if you were 20% braver in 2025? I just love that question. I think that's so cool because often we think like, what would it look like if you made 20% more money in 2025? What would it look like if you lost 20% of your weight in 2025? Those are common things that we throw out there. Those are measurable things. But when you take something like a quality, like bravery or courage or kindness, some kind of value, and say, what would it look like if you really leaned into this next year? I love that idea. So Whitney, what's your initial reaction when you hear me say that?
No, I love the phrasing of this. I love placing a goal, if you will, on something like that, like a value, as you mentioned. And I feel inspired because now I need to go back. You and Randy both on the last episode, like challenged us to really make our list, right? Of like how we want to show up in the world. How do we want to live, even when, and really have that compass of even when life gets difficult, coming back to those values and back to that way of life. Now I need to like re-examine that list and add that 20% bravery number to it and say, okay, well, which part of this can I just turn up the dial a little bit?
Yeah. Where would you want to add 20%? What would it look like if you leaned in? So let's just take the bravery thing. I love the idea of that. I mean, I'm trying to picture what would it look like if I was 20% braver in 2025. Well, maybe, some of the obvious things, but important ones, some of the conversations that I lean more towards harmony and rather than having that tough, direct conversation. Well, why not have that? What's so wrong with doing that? Maybe that would be an example of something if I lived a little braver in 2025. Or, use my time differently. That's another way to be brave. I'm going to use my time differently. Maybe I'm going to take more vacations, or I'm going to choose to work differently than I did in 2024. I don't know what that looks like yet. I'm still kind of working it through, but I just love this idea of 20% braver. Like, in what ways have I been playing things too safe? Because, the one of the things that I have learned in 2024 is, life's too short. And so, goodness, why play it safe? I mean, if it's going to be short, why not take some big swings? And so I love that idea of 20% braver. So I don't know, Whitney, when you think of 20% braver, is there a particular area in your life that you feel like you could attach that to more easily?
You're playing too safe is probably a really good place that I too could start. I'd also say being braver in the sense of like making someone else's life better. If there was something that I could add to that, I feel like sometimes, and I know we have to be careful with that in the sense of you never want it to come across as you're trying to get something from someone else, but just being a joy to someone else. And that could be as simple as, saying hi to someone that maybe you wouldn't say hi to, or maybe you want to donate somewhere, or buy gifts for a family that are in need. Because even that, right? Like it's maybe my budget isn't endless, but that's a little bit of bravery to say, well, I want to spin back into somebody else who maybe doesn't have as much as I do.
Yeah. So what I love right there is how could you be 20% more generous, more
Mm,
kind, compassionate? Felt like that was kind of what you were inspiring us to do. How could we do that? I mean, we can
yeah.
always be more compassionate and more kind, give people that kind of benefit of the doubt, or assume positive intent. You know, and we all have opportunities to do that. Every time you get behind the wheel of a car and drive into traffic, you have an opportunity to be kind to someone who is driving like a lunatic. You have an opportunity, or you can honk your horn and flash your lights and then get in front of them and cut them off just like they did you. Not that I've ever done that before, Whitney, but I'm just saying if I was to do something like that, that's what it would look like. But yeah, we could be kinder, we could be more generous, we could be give people more of the benefit of the doubt. And what would it look like if we did that? Just how we kind of walk through life, just 20% more than we normally do. I think that's a I think that's a great one. I
Yeah.
think
Maybe it's a little like 20% braver to be different, right? Like everyone else is getting upset in traffic and honking their horn. Maybe you just need to turn on the radio and sing a great 80s song and like
yeah.
just enjoy that time in your car, right? Like you can have your own little party in the car on your way to something, and that really makes you feel a little bit better too. I feel like if you start the day off honking at everybody else, your day's not going to go as well.
So I've got another one. And this I'm going to sound like I'm contradicting myself because I just said this first one was 20% braver. Okay. How can I speak 20% less in
Mm,
2025 and listen more? And I'll give you a great example. So my daughter's my oldest, she's 23. And then and she graduated from college and she's working and it's great. And then I've got a 20-year-old son. He's a sophomore in college. And then I've got a almost 18-year-old son. He's a senior in high school. And what I have found, learned it the hard way, but it's an important parenting lesson, is that not all of my opinions are welcome at the dinner table. Particularly if I'm voicing like a political opinion or opinion about something like that. You know, my kids are still forming their own opinions and they are looking for opportunities to say, no, you're wrong. And I realized recently, particularly during this political season, what's the point of me voicing these opinions? It doesn't really matter. They're not going to necessarily embrace my opinion. It's only going to create an opportunity for more conflict. And so I've been actually practicing just listening more, just asking them questions and really not inserting my opinion unless I'm asked. And I have found it has not only created a little more harmony, which I did talk about, not always leaning into harmony earlier, but has created a little more harmony, but it's also allowed them to feel more accepted, even though they may have a different point of view. And so, we had in our house, we had many different candidates were voted for the election this year. It was not a uniform across the board in the Smith household. And that's okay. I mean, that's obviously the American population voted in lots of different ways. But there was no need to necessarily make that into some kind of argument or antagonize. So I've just been really thinking about that and reflecting on that. What would it look like if I listened 20% more in situations where my opinion wasn't asked for, and it's not really necessary to give it. So that's something else. What about listening 20% more?
yeah, I really like that. It's interesting. I was just talking to a close friend a couple of days ago because I have a birthday in December. And I kind of made this half joke, but it was half serious of like, wow, I've been on earth for like 3 decades and I don't really feel like I know that much, right? Like you kind of go through life and um, your opinions change about things, but part of that is listening a little bit more because it's super easy to get caught, kind of like you were saying, like in our own little bubble of how we view the world or how we think about things. But allowing ourselves to speak less and listen to others more can really open up a different viewpoint or I'll take a Randy Hain word, the aperture, right? It
Oh,
kind of
that's a Randy
opens.
Hain word. Look at you pulling out the
Yes.
Randy Hain word. Yes. Yes. We drink.
But it does, it opens that up to different viewpoints, and you can learn a thing or 2 from somebody else.
Yeah. And I think sometimes, at least for me, with my family, I'm like, oh, now this is my time to just share all my opinions and everything I'm thinking about. Maybe not. That's probably not a good idea. Because at the end of the day, for me as a parent, my number one goal is when my kids are grown and out of the house, I want them to want to come back. I want
Right.
them to want to come hang out with us and do that. And that's been true this year with my daughter. We've had a really great time with her since she started working and spending, just enough time with her during the week and weekends when we can. And it's been really, really nice. I think she's enjoyed it. We have too. And so I want my kids to not say, I'm moving to the other side of the world to get away from you. And so it's if that's the goal, I want them to feel like, no matter how they view things, I want them to feel accepted and not look for a battle or look for a fight. So that's where my 20% listen more comes in. But yeah,
Absolutely.
we can learn so much more. I would like
Absolutely.
to, if I think about 2025 compared to 2024, at least 20% more vacation time, at least. So that's another one. I would like to spend a little more time, and maybe that goes into a bucket of more time caring for myself. I did not do a good enough job of that last year. I've been very open and transparent. It's been really tough goings. My dad's 90, my mom's 87. They do not act like rational people at this point. And so it has been very draining to care for them. And then on top of that, with my oldest dog dying and just a lot of other challenges with extended family over the last year, it's not been fun, to be honest. And to care for myself more, that is really, really important. And I need to make more time for that. I haven't done a good enough job. Now, part of it was the economy was not a very good year from a business standpoint for a lot of folks in professional services, me included, Randy included in that. And so that's been a little tough navigating that. But that said, I didn't care for myself enough. I want to do that at least 20% better in 2025. So that's definitely something that I want to be a lot more intentional about is how can I be a little bit kinder to myself? And sometimes that's just little things like, if I'm traveling on a long flight, maybe I only bill the client for coach, but maybe I pay the difference to upgrade. So that's a little bit more of a comfortable experience for me. So I'm not intentionally putting myself in stressful situations if I can avoid that. So just little things like that can make all the difference. Whitney, how about you? Does any of that resonate with you? Or do you feel like,
Absolutely.
yeah, okay,
Absolutely, I agree with it, and I love the fact that you called out, like, the little things, right? It really doesn't have to be something that is extravagant or far away or takes a lot of time, but, I believe you referenced this in the last, conversation between you and Randy, but you just said, "You know what? I feel like I'm in a place to be more inspired when I've actually taken care of myself, when I've, gone outside and gotten in nature, or I've spent a good 45 minutes on the treadmill." I am so there as well. I can tell if I'm getting itchy about something or
mm,
anxious about something. I can stop and go, okay, Whitney, well, did you sleep well? Have you eaten something today? Have you walked outside today? Been in the sun? Like doing those little things puts me in a much better place to accept everything else that's coming at me.
yeah, that's great. So let's see. If I was to add one more 20% to our mix, we've already talked about being brave, talked about generosity and kindness.
Hmm.
We talked about listening. We've talked about just self care and being kind to yourself. I don't know, Whitney. I think I've got one, but do you have anything that's jumping out for you?
Ooh. Well, the other two things that I thought of is, and maybe this would fall into the category of generosity, so you can tell me, but also like giving of time to
Mm,
others, maybe
mm,
being that listening ear, making sure we're sticking to our one-on-ones on our schedule, and maybe that's just time in general, like building in 20% extra time for things unexpected in our schedules so that you have that adaptability when things come up, you can pause and take that moment to take care of and focus where it needs to be.
So if I was to channel my inner Randy Hain, he would say, we put air in our calendars, is one of Randy's favorite
Yes.
phrases. And so maybe that's it. And then that's a bold challenge. How do we create 20% more air in our calendars in 2025? So that when you've got this emergency thing that pops up, there's a place to put it. So that if you're running late to a meeting, so I'll this is an admission I had yesterday. I had a appointment I was driving to, and I was just going to make it on time. And I drove right up to an intersection, and right next to me was a car that had basically died. And the person was outside the car, and they were trying to push the car kind of from the driver's side. And I thought to myself, I really want to help them. I know what that's like. I've been in that situation before. I want to pull over, and I want to get behind the car and help them so they can steer, and I'll push. I really wanted to do that. But I was running too late. I was going to miss my appointment if I did that. And I'm paying for this appointment. It was a medical appointment. So I'm like, I couldn't do it. So I ended up driving on. And I felt bad about that. Well, had I had the 20% extra time, hadn't I given myself a little more of a buffer, I could have done both. I could have still had my appointment, and I could have gotten out and helped. So I love the idea of creating a little more of that space, that flexibility, that air in our calendar. So we can be present for folks when they reach out to us. At 20% there. I think that's great, Whitney. I love that.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
The second one I thought of is 20% more investing in self, but like from an education standpoint. Like I love learning something new. I love reading. Sometimes I'm able to read more often than not. And so I'd really like to make that like a regular practice.
Yeah. I think that's a really good one. 20% more time to learn.
Yeah.
You know, I'll end it. Well, so I think that's great because I could really do that. I need to do that too. I've got to figure out an easier way to do that. I'm finding when I get kind of late at night and I decide to read, I'm not really inspired to read at that point in time. I'm just not. So finding more time and other ways to do that. But I love that one. I love that. So I'll if I kind of land us a little bit here with our 20% more of or better in 2025. You know, I in the last inspiration conversation Randy and I had, I talked about my dog passing away and me writing down a list of some of the traits that made her just so great. And she was always really present with everybody. And I would love to do 20% more time with the people in my life that really, really matter to me. Just make more time to go spend it with them and just be fully present. It was easier with my daughter when she was in college because she was in a sorority and there would be always some kind of a daddy-daughter weekend or something that was on the calendar that we could plug into. It's a little harder if you don't have that. So I need to create that. And it's just being intentional to spend that 20% more time with the people I really love that matter to me, just be with them. And so making that time. So I got to figure out how to do that. Maybe that's some, fun weekend trips with my kids or just something, but I'd like to do a little more of that in 2025 too. So I think this is a nice build on my conversation with Randy on inspiration.
Yeah.
This is kind of what would it look like if you took this idea of 20% more, 20% braver, 20% more kinder, more generous, listen 20% more, finding ways to learn 20% more self-care 20% of the time. So, and the list can go on. And maybe you've got one as you're a listener that you want to add to that list. Maybe there's a particular value and you say to yourself, what would it be if I did 20% more of that next year? Maybe you're 20% more resilient in 2025. There's really no wrong answer other than what is that quality or trait that's really important to you? And what would it look like if you did it just 20% better? And if you can figure that out and commit to it, I have a feeling 2025 is not only going to be a rewarding and fulfilling year for you, but it's going to be inspiring for so many others.